Internet, what is happening? Welcome back. Time to do some gear things on the Fusion. So we're putting a set of 409s in the Super 88. I've already got the diff apart, and interesting enough, in order to get just the diff out of the case was a little story. I'll splice in a picture there. Essentially had to compress it from noon and 6 o'clock to make the case spread this way and pry it out. I'm replacing the differential and just about ready to get this thing assembled and set up to get rid of the 355s because they were kind of poorly matched with the TR6060 that's in the Fusion. Really long legs, so I'm hoping to get out of the hole faster and have more use of more gears in that, because I was really only drifting mostly in second. It's kind of boring, so here we go. All right, so got the ring gear and the carrier bearings on the new differential. And now, important thing, I need to reuse that shim that's in between the bearing and the gear here. So, gotta get that bearing off. I just cut these off. Cut the race off, score, pretty much grind a nice groove into the inner race, and then it'll take a chisel, pop it off. Then I'm gonna reuse that shim so that I can reassemble the new pinion gear, which is in the box. All right, 10 out of 10 times, I hardly ever keep the pinion bearing when I'm doing gear job because we're putting a new gear in. But you gotta take that bearing off, like I said, to get the shim. So now I can press my new pinion bearings on there. And there's a little washer that goes behind it on the seal side. And then start putting it back into the case and crush the sleeve. Now, I've never done a Super 88 before, but this looks like it's a lot easier to crush than the older 88s. Just because how big they are, it looks like it'll take less effort to get your rotating torque that you need. So, which will be convenient because in a solid axle car, you usually keep the solid axle in the car. So I'm probably gonna put this thing in the press when it comes time to having to torque that. I'm kind of going through my head how I'm going to hold it. Well, I guess the flange will be, so in order to hold the flange, I'll probably just put some bolts in there and use a long pry bar and my torque wrench to crush the sleeve. And then after that's all said and done and I'm happy with the torque, they give you one with the insulation kit and one with the gear set. So if I go too much, I got a spare. And once that's all in there, I can put the differential back in. And like I said, I had to put this in a press to squeeze this so this gets wider. So what I'll do is set this up in the press. Got these little wood blocks. This is per Ford, but I usually do with a C-clamp, but I don't have the little case holder. So I put those in the bottom and top, and I'll put a mag base indicator on like the press, and then have it perpendicular to the hole here and see it move so that I can get the carrier in, because it was not coming out. But then again, the bearing that is the side that supports the axles, which was trashed, like the inner race of it was actually pushed into the carrier. So I think that's why I also couldn't get it out without squeezing it. But even then, it was a bit of a bear. So we're cruising. All right, so after a little bit of battling, I pressed the shim we were talking about in the back of this bearing. And then that was as far as I had to put the races in the case. Those come with the bearings. Hard to screw them up because they're totally different sizes. And then had to use the vise and some, where are those things? Some bolts on the flange, and kind of had it set up here to hold the flange and crush that sleeve. That's the sleeve that we crushed. Like I said, and then extra I thought that was gonna be easier. It was just as hard, if not harder, than a straight axle 8.8. But we got it crushed. I really like the preload on it. And now I'm ready to install a carrier. So what I have to do is I have my races saved on which side went on the carrier, and we use those shims, install everything, and check the backlash. So I got everything staged up to install the diff. I tried putting it in traditionally, as in just trying to shove it back in there with the, I saved which shim was on each side, and, oh, that one's still in here. And yeah, there was not going in, like there was a visible overlap. So I am gonna have to put it in the press and, like I said, get an indicator on here to see how much it has moved so I can get it in the case, which is kind of new to me, but it's okay. It's all learning, and I can do this in the future for people. So here we go. All right, so not bad for my first time. Went as expected. Little thing, while I was kind of snugging these up, I realized, you know, I could get the diff in there with the case, you know, squeeze that way so it's pushing out. But I didn't want to lock these in with that pressure because then the backlash reading might be wrong, but I wanted it all the way set in. So now everything's in, and now when I tighten these, it should be exactly where it's going to be in reality. So I'm going to torque them down and then check backlash. I think that'll be okay. So that's, I'll have to look it up, but usually want 8 to 12 on the new 8/8. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm keeping it there just because it's a hassle, and I'm fairly certain that's right spec. All right, so I had to install new axle support bearings. The other ones were, this whole thing was just full of garbage, and I'm gonna put the seals on, and then pretty sure I can put the cover on then. So, got the diff all sealed up, ready to be put back in. Time to get that thing in the air and swap this thing out. I'll kind of show you, maybe if some of you haven't swapped the center diff on the S550 before, this will be pretty much exactly it, minus maybe the exhaust. So, car's up, fans on. Let's delete this wind machine here. Oh. And so besides the brake system, it's obviously not a stock S550. It's going to be pretty much the same as your current generation Mustang. And this is the part I dread the most, having to drain the fluid. Because Ford and basically all domestic cars don't put like axle stubs in there, so you can just swap it out without draining stuff. And see, I don't have dual exhaust anymore, so I'll be able to slide that thing right out. So on your car, you'll have to drop the axle back to get the diff out, and of course you'll have to disconnect the drive shaft. You can do that right away if you want. But I believe last time I went through the whole rigmarole of getting rid of the brakes and all this stuff, when in fact if I just disconnect certain links in here, and I'll show you, it'll all just kind of fold out, and then when you can pop the axle enough to clear the diff to swap it out. All right, so you do have to disconnect basically all the links, but I didn't even do the brakes. Pop the axle out of the diff. Now it can just kind of hang out there because it's cleared of the diff. So it can just hang out there, or if you want to take it all the way out, your call. So now I gotta do the other side and then do the drive shaft and the diff bolts. All right, you can see 4 bolts it takes. And the 315s are out. Now, the only reason I had 315s in this car was because it was my spare, and the 355 gear set that was in here. Decided to break the weld a couple times. Not sure if I explained this earlier, but we can edit that out. And decided to go with 409s, like I said, because the TR660 has tall gears. So the only thing I do is transfer my little breather tube, and my exhaust was rubbing on this tab and rattling, so I'm gonna kind of trim that off a little bit, do the breather tube, shove it back in. Just like that, 409's in. Except I gotta fill fluid, put the axles in, the knuckles back together, but it's in. So really excited to see how this thing accelerates with such a, well, at least from the 315s anyway. I knew what it was like with the 355s, but man, the 315s were terrible. So, cheerio. Alright, got the Fusion fired up here. Gave her a little spin to see how it feels. I'm gonna temp this. Too lazy to get my GoPro in a mount. See if I can do it with the phone. No noises in the rear end. Yeah, so see what it does on the road. Apparently everybody wants to go on the road today and turn in. Oh, that accelerates so much better. Oh, that's reverse. That is it for me on this episode. Car feels way better than the 315s, and I'll be able to use third gear on more tracks, and if need be, second and third are pretty close, so downshifting shouldn't be a problem either. So I had to try it out later in October for probably the first time I've driven in a while. So yeah, if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. We'll see you next time.